My name is Serena. I'm 34 years old. And 6 weeks ago, on a cold Tuesday morning in November, I stood in the driveway of a house I had just purchased and watched my father try to use a key that no longer worked. He knocked. He knocked again. He pressed his face to the window. And then he looked at me, standing on the porch, arms folded, holding a brand new set of keys, and I watched 30 years of smug, untouchable certainty collapse across his face like a building coming down. I said 4 words. This is my house. Then I went inside and locked the door. Before I tell you everything, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely want to know how we got here, because this story goes back a long way. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. And now let me take you back to the beginning, to the house, and to the woman who made it everything. My mother, Gloria Reyes Marsh, was the kind of person who made a house feel like it was breathing. She was born in Cali, Colombia, came to the United States at 19 with 2 suitcases and a cousin's phone number, and spent 20 years building a life in Charlotte, North Carolina, with her own 2 hands. She cleaned offices. She waitressed. She took night classes in bookkeeping. By the time I was born, she was managing accounts for a small construction company and she had saved enough for a down payment on a 3-bedroom craftsman bungalow on Caldwell Street. That house was not just property to my mother. It was proof. It was everything she had ever survived. She chose every tile in that kitchen herself. She planted the jasmine along the porch railing. She repainted the front door a deep coral every spring because she said coral was the color of resilience. I grew up in that house surrounded by the specific gravity of a woman who had fought for every square foot of it. My father, Douglas Marsh, was charming when I was young. Tall, easy laughing, the kind of man who could make a whole room feel like a party. He worked in sales, which meant he worked in performance, and for the first 10 years of my life I thought he was wonderful. He coached my soccer team for 1 season. He made pancakes on Sunday mornings. He called my mother, his Glorita, and made her laugh loud enough that the neighbors probably heard. But charm is not character. And over time, the way you only notice when you're a child paying quiet attention, I began to see the seams. The Sundays when the pancakes didn't happen and he didn't explain why. The trips that ran longer than planned. The way my mother's laugh changed over the years, going from something that came easily to something she had to reach for. My parents divorced when I was 13. My mother got the house. My father moved into an apartment 40 minutes away and began the slow process of treating his children like obligations he could schedule around his convenience. I have a younger brother, Marcus, who idolized our father in the way that younger brothers sometimes do, choosing willful blindness over the complicated truth. I did not have that option. I had watched my mother's face too carefully for too many years. After the divorce, it was the 3 of us in that house on Caldwell Street. My mother, me, Marcus. She refinished the hardwood floors herself one summer weekend, renting a sander and watching YouTube tutorials and cursing in Spanish when the edges didn't come out even. She built a raised garden bed in the backyard and grew tomatoes and peppers and a particular variety of Colombian herbs I still can't name but still remember the smell of. She threw birthday parties that the whole block came to. She was electric. She was sufficient. She did not need my father and she never pretended otherwise that I left for UNC Charlotte at 18. Full scholarship, academic, not athletic. The first person in my immediate family to attend a 4-year university on merit alone. My mother cried at drop-off. Not sad tears. Proud tears. The distinction mattered to her. On the drive away, she stopped the car 2 blocks from campus and held my face in both hands and said, in her accented English that I have loved every syllable of my entire life, "You come from a woman who built something from nothing. You remember that always." I remembered. What I did not know, what she had not told me, what she probably couldn't bear to say out loud, was that she had been sick for 2 years already. The diagnosis came 4 months after I started college. Stage 3 breast cancer, aggressive, spreading faster than the treatment could contain it. She called me on a Wednesday evening and she told me plainly, the way she told me everything, no softening, no sugarcoating, just the facts and then her plan for dealing with them. She said she was going to fight. She said Marcus would help manage the house while she was in treatment. She said I was not to drop out, not to consider dropping out, not to think about it even once. I flew home every break. I spent every weekend I could manage on a Greyhound bus between Charlotte and Chapel Hill, sitting with her through treatments, cooking the soup she could keep down, watching telenovelas with her on Tuesday nights because she said they were the only thing dramatic enough to distract from how she felt. I learned to braid her hair in the weeks before she lost it, so I could do it faster in the weeks after it grew back thin and soft. My father visited twice in 18 months. Both times he stayed less than 2 hours. Both times he looked deeply uncomfortable and found reasons to leave. He was not a man who knew how to be present in anything difficult. My mother died in March of my sophomore year. She was 51 years old. She died in the house on Caldwell Street, in the bedroom with the coral curtains she had chosen herself. With me on one side of her bed and Marcus on the other. I held her hand until it was still. Before I continue, if you've ever lost the person who was your whole foundation, please drop a comment. This part of the story is for you. And stay with me, because it is about to get so much worse before it gets better. My mother left a will. It was handwritten and notarized, filed with an attorney named Patricia Wells who she had hired specifically for this purpose. She was nothing if not thorough. The house on Caldwell Street was left jointly to Marcus and me, with the explicit instruction that it not be sold without the agreement of both parties, and that under no circumstances was our father to have any claim to it. She had made herself very clear about that part. What happened next took me years to fully understand, and even longer to forgive myself for not seeing in time. My father started coming around more after my mother died. Not out of grief, he had no grief that I could detect, but out of something I now recognize as opportunity. He was warm to Marcus in a way he had never been during my childhood, taking him to basketball games, buying him things, calling him my boy, with an ease that would have been touching if it hadn't arrived so precisely when there was a house to be influenced about. Marcus was 19. He was grieving. He was pliable in the way that grief makes young men pliable when a father figure offers warmth and certainty. I saw what was happening and I tried to name it, and Marcus told me I was paranoid, that I'd always been too hard on Dad, that Dad had changed. I went back to school. I had to. I had a scholarship with GPA requirements and a mother who had made me promise not to drop out. So I went back to Chapel Hill and I called Marcus twice a week, and I believed, because I needed to believe, that the house was fine. 6 months after my mother's funeral, my father introduced us to Deborah. Deborah was 54, recently divorced, and possessed of a very specific kind of smile that I can only describe as proprietary, the smile of someone already calculating what they own. She had 2 adult daughters of her own and a large personality that took up most of the available air in any room. My father looked at her the way he had not looked at my mother in 20 years. Marcus thought she was funny and warm. I watched her eyes when she thought no one was watching, and I felt a cold certainty settle into my chest. They married 11 months later. 3 weeks after the wedding, my father called me. He said he and Deborah were going to move into the house on Caldwell Street. He said Marcus had agreed. He said it made financial sense, their combined rent was expensive, the house was just sitting there, Marcus was moving into an apartment with friends anyway. He said it as though it were already settled. He said it as though my name were not on the deed. "That's Mom's house," I said. "It's a house, Serena. Your mother would want it lived in. My mother left it to Marcus and me. It cannot be transferred without my signature." A pause. The kind of pause my father used when he was calculating a new angle. "We're not talking about transferring anything. Just living there. You're in Chapel Hill. Marcus isn't using it. Why should it sit empty?" I said I would think about it. I did not agree. I ended the call and immediately contacted Patricia Wells, my mother's attorney, who confirmed my understanding. My father had no legal right to occupy or make decisions about that property. My name was on the deed. I had not signed anything. He could not do this without my consent. I called Marcus. Marcus said I was being selfish. He said Deborah was nice and Dad seemed happy and Mom was gone and the house was just a house. He said it in the voice of someone who had been worked on for months, slowly and carefully, until the reasonable position sounded unreasonable. The next 6 months are painful to recount. My father moved into the house. Not with my permission, he simply did it, counting on the fact that I was 2 hours away and grieving and overwhelmed with finishing my degree, counting on the fact that Marcus would not resist, counting on the fact that I would choose peace over a fight. He was almost right. I came home for Christmas and found Deborah's furniture in the living room. Her photographs on the walls where my mother's photographs had been. Her daughter's names on stockings hung above the fireplace that my mother had painted coral. The jasmine along the porch railing had been pulled out. Deborah didn't like the smell. I went to Patricia Wells's office the day after Christmas. I asked her what I could do. She was honest with me. She said that legally, I had rights, but exercising them would mean filing to partition the property, a process that could take years, that would require Marcus's involvement, and that would cost money I did not have as a 20-year-old college student. She said sometimes the right legal position and the practical position were very far apart. I went back to Chapel Hill. I graduated. I got a job. I did what my mother told me to do. And I carried the house on Caldwell Street like a stone in my chest, always there, always heavy, never forgotten. Let me pause here and speak to you directly, because I think some of you know exactly what I mean when I say, I was outgunned. Not legally. Morally, I was completely in the right. Practically, I was a 21-year-old with no savings going up against a man who had decades of practice making the unreasonable sound reasonable to everyone around him. Sometimes the right move is to wait. Not forever. Just until you have what you need. If that resonates with you, comment below. And subscribe, because what I built over the next 12 years is exactly what this story is about. I am a methodical person. I got that from my mother. She didn't plant a garden by scattering seeds and hoping. She tested the soil, built the beds, chose her varieties deliberately. She planned. Then she executed. Then she watched things grow. I became a licensed appraiser. It took 5 years of evening courses, mentorship hours, and state examinations while working a full-time job. I specialized in residential real estate in the Charlotte metro area. I know what houses are worth. I know what they're worth when sellers are motivated and when buyers are patient. I know what they're worth when markets shift and families aren't paying attention. I also, very quietly and over a long time, saved money. Every raise. Every bonus. Every tax refund. I did not take expensive vacations. I did not buy a new car. I had one goal, not a vague goal, not a feeling, but a number, and every month I got closer to it. I stayed in loose contact with Marcus over the years. He had grown up into a man I mostly recognized, still inclined to take the path of least resistance, still unwilling to see our father clearly, but not unkind. He knew the house bothered me. He didn't know how much. He called occasionally, usually around holidays, usually with a slightly guilty energy that told me somewhere beneath his rationalization, he understood what had happened. Deborah I avoided entirely. My father I spoke to on the phone twice a year, at Christmas and at my birthday, conversations that were polished and brief and revealed nothing. What I was waiting for, I told myself, was the right moment. I didn't know exactly what the right moment would look like. I just knew I would recognize it when it arrived. It arrived in September, 2 years ago, in the form of an obituary. Deborah Walsh, Deborah Marsh, she had taken my father's name, died of a stroke. Sudden, without much warning. She was 62. Her daughters posted the obituary online, and a cousin of mine texted it to me because she thought I should know. I read it twice. I felt nothing about Deborah's death that I am proud of feeling. What I felt, almost immediately, was clarity. Because I knew my father. I knew how he handled the aftermath of loss. I knew the window that would open. I called Patricia Wells, who was semi-retired but still practicing. I explained what I needed. She said, "Serena, I have been waiting 13 years for you to call me about this house. Here is what we had. My name was still on the deed. It had never been removed, because removing it would have required my signature. Marcus's name was also still on the deed. My father had occupied the property for 13 years without legal ownership, without any transfer of interest, without my consent. And Marcus, grieving his mother for years and now watching his father grieve a second wife, finally tired of being in the middle of something he'd never fully examined, when I called him and laid it out carefully, patiently, with Patricia on a three-way call to answer his legal questions, something shifted. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I should have listened to you 14 years ago." He said, "Tell me what you need me to sign." The following 4 months were the most precise work I have ever done. Marcus and I initiated a partition agreement. Since we were in agreement, both of us, majority owners, unified, it was not a hostile process. We valued the property. The house on Caldwell Street had appreciated significantly in 13 years, and I knew exactly what it was worth because I had been monitoring it since before I got my license. Patricia filed the necessary documentation. We made the father an offer. Not a cruel offer. A fair market offer, with a 60-day window to vacate. Patricia sent it certified mail. She also sent it by email and by courier, ensuring it could not be claimed as undelivered. My father called me within an hour of receiving it. He was not warm. He demanded to know what I thought I was doing. He said this was his home. He said Deborah had just died and I was doing this now. He said I was cold, that I had always been cold, that my mother had made me cold. I let him finish. Then I said, "Dad, this house was never yours. It was never Deborah's. It was never transferred to you. Mom left it to Marcus and me. We want it back. You have 60 days. Marcus would never," he started. "Call him," I said. He signed the paperwork. Another pause. Longer this time. "You planned this," he said. His voice had changed, the warmth completely gone, something colder underneath. "You waited for Deborah to die and you planned this." "I waited until I had the legal and financial ability to do what was right," I said. "That took longer than it should have. I'm sorry it took this long." I meant that last part. Not for his sake. For my mother's. He did not go quietly. He retained an attorney, a man who wrote several very aggressive letters that Patricia dispatched with the calm efficiency of someone who had read far more threatening correspondence in her career. He called Marcus repeatedly. Marcus, to his enormous credit, did not waver. He had made a decision and he was keeping it. He told me later that each phone call from our father clarified something he had spent years refusing to see. By the 5th call, he stopped answering. The 60 days elapsed. My father vacated the house on Caldwell Street on a Thursday morning in November. I know the exact time because I had arranged for a locksmith to meet me there at noon, and I arrived 20 minutes early and sat in my car on the street where I had grown up and breathed in and breathed out until my hands were steady. The locksmith changed every lock. The front door. The back door. The side garage entry. I signed the paperwork and I held the new keys and I stood on the porch where the jasmine used to grow and I felt something so large and so complicated that I don't have one word for it. Relief is too small. Justice is too abstract. The closest I can get is, I felt my mother. My father arrived at 2 p.m. His car pulled into the driveway and he got out and he walked to the front door and he used his key and the key did not work. He tried twice. He looked at the lock. He looked at me. I said, "This is my house." He stood in the driveway for a long moment. He was 70 years old and for the first time in my memory he looked it. Not old in the comfortable way of a man surrounded by his choices, old in the way of someone who has suddenly seen the distance between who they are and who they thought they were. Serena. His voice was different from any voice I had heard him use before. Not commanding. Not performing. Something small and unfamiliar. "I think you should go," I said. Not unkindly. As close to not unkindly as I could manage. He stood there another moment. Then he got in his car and he drove away. Let me pause here again, because I need to tell you something I didn't expect. I had imagined that moment for years. The moment of reclaiming. I thought it would feel triumphant. I thought there would be something cathartic and clean, like a wound finally healed. And there was some of that, yes. But mostly, standing on that porch, what I felt was grief. Not for my father. Not for Deborah. Grief for the 13 years. Grief for the woman who should have been there to see it. Grief for all the versions of that house that would never exist now, the Thanksgivings and the phone calls and the Sunday mornings with coffee on the porch. You can be completely right and still mourn what the wrongness cost you. Those two things can be true at once. If you've ever reclaimed something that should have always been yours, and felt sad instead of victorious, I see you. Drop a comment. And subscribe for what comes next, because the story isn't quite over. Marcus came down the following weekend. We walked through the house together for the first time in 13 years, just the two of us, room by room. Deborah's furniture was gone. My father had arranged for it to be collected by her daughters in the days before he vacated. What was left were walls and floors and light and memory. The hardwood floors our mother had sanded herself. Still beautiful. Still holding. The kitchen where she had learned to make biscuits from a neighbor because she was determined, she said, to master one proper southern dish. The coral paint on the front door, Deborah had painted it beige, but my mother's coral was still visible at the edges, underneath, where she hadn't quite covered the trim. I brought paint. A color I had matched at the hardware store from a photograph I had carried in my wallet for 11 years. A photograph of my mother on that porch, laughing at something off camera, her hand resting on the railing, the door behind her exactly the right shade of coral. Marcus and I painted the front door that Sunday. It took 2 coats. We didn't talk very much while we worked. We didn't need to. When it was done, we stood back and looked at it, and Marcus said, she would have had something to say about our technique. And I laughed, a real laugh, the kind that comes from somewhere deep, because he was right. She would have pointed out exactly where we'd gotten uneven and she would have touched it up herself and made it perfect and she would not have been gentle about our errors. I planted jasmine along the porch railing the following spring. The same variety. I found it at a specialty nursery 40 miles from Charlotte, drove out there on a Saturday morning, came home with 6 starts and spent the afternoon in the dirt. Here is what I know now that I didn't know when I was 20 years old, kneeling by my mother's bed watching her breathe. Some things cannot be rushed. Some reckonings need time, not because the wrong isn't urgent, but because you need to be ready. You need to have built something. You need to have become someone who can hold what they're fighting for after they win it. I was not ready at 21. I was broke and grieving and alone in a legal situation that required money and allies and patience I did not yet have. The right thing to do was wait. Not surrender. Not accept. Wait. Prepare. Build. My father has not contacted me since November. Marcus tells me he's well. I feel neither satisfaction nor guilt about his situation. He is a man in his 70s, his wife has died, and he is reaping a harvest he planted himself over 30 years. I did not plant it. I simply declined to keep watering it. What I have is the house. Not as I left it at 18, not as my mother left it at her death. Houses aren't time machines. It is different. 13 years different. But the floors are the same. The light through the east-facing kitchen window at 7 in the morning is the same. The creak on the 4th porch step, the one my mother never fixed because she said it was useful to know when someone was coming, is the same. I sleep in the house now on weekends. I am renovating carefully, slowly, the way my mother would have done it, researching each decision, doing what I can myself, hiring out only what requires expertise. I am learning to tile. My grout lines are not perfect. My mother would have pointed this out. There is a photograph on the kitchen wall now. My mother at 35, standing in the driveway of this house the day she bought it, holding the keys up toward the camera, beaming with a specific joy that I have never seen on any other face in any other photograph. She is wearing a green dress and her hair is down and she looks like someone who has just won a war that no one else knew she was fighting. I look at that photograph every morning when I make coffee. I come from a woman who built something from nothing. I remember that always. So here is what I want to leave you with, if you've stayed with me through all of this. People who take what doesn't belong to them are counting on your exhaustion. They're counting on your youth, your grief, your poverty, your isolation. They're counting on the gap between what is morally true and what you can currently prove or afford to defend. And sometimes, that gap exists and you cannot immediately close it. That is not defeat. That is timing. Keep your documents. Know your rights. Build your resources. Find your Marcus, the person who, when they finally stop looking away, becomes your most important ally. And trust the timing of your own life, because some things ripen slowly and are better for it. My mother's house smells like fresh paint and coffee and the beginning of something. It is mine. It has always been mine. It just took me 12 years and everything I had to prove it. I don't hate my father. I want to say that clearly. Hate is a weight I'd rather not carry in my mother's house. He is who he is. He has always been who he is. The difference is that I no longer need to pretend otherwise. To anyone watching who has had something taken from them by someone who was supposed to protect it, a house, an inheritance, a promise, a piece of your history, I see you. It is not over. Build. Wait. Move when the moment is right. And when you get it back, paint the door the color that was always meant to be there. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, hit the notification bell, and leave a comment telling me, has your family ever taken something that was never theirs to take? I want to read every single one. This is Serena. And I'm home.